In this week's news, LG unveils the G4 Beat, more news on BlackBerry's upcoming Android phone, and ASUS launches a 256GB Zenfone 2.
All this and more on this week's episode of Bandwidth Blog on Air. Welcome to episode 7.
Welcome to Bandwidth Blog on Air, the weekly podcast of bandwidthblog.com.
Bryan, you were at the launch event of the LG G4 in Cape Town, which is LG's mid-tier entrant into the smartphone market. Tell us more about the event, what you saw and what you thought of the device.
Yes, I was at the LG launch event of the G4 Beat, which took place last week, Wednesday, at the Protea Fire and Ice Hotel here in Cape Town. And what I saw was LG introducing what they are billing as their flagship, the G4's little sister, which will be the G4 Beat. Now, this follows on from last year's G3 Beat, which again was a sibling device to the flagship G3. And LG's focus with the G4 is to bring a premium design and some of the more premium factors of the G4 to a more affordable price point. So this is going to be a phone that's going to appeal to more mid-tier consumers. And in LG's own words, the G4 Beat is positioned as a mid-tier smartphone, which you won't have to sacrifice on power and versatility despite being at a lower price point.
Well, if you're not going to have to sacrifice that much in terms of performance and usability, what is the specs going to look like? Well,
the G4 Beat today still stands as a mid-tier device, but compared to last year's G3 Beat, it does bring a host of improvements. It's powered by a quad-core 1.5 GHz Cortex A53. It's packing a 423 ppi 1080p display, and it's coming equipped with 8 GB of internal storage. Now, that's a big up from last year's G3 Beat, which brought a quad-core 1.2 GHz Cortex A7 and carried only a 294 ppi 720p screen.
Now that the boring stuff is out of the way, what did you think about the device when you held it in your hand? How does it feel compared to the G4 and even compared to the G3 Beat?
Well, as I mentioned in my write-up last week, I actually was a G3 Beat owner. I never really particularly took to the device because, quite frankly, it had a horrible build quality and the software was prone to the worst interface lag that I've yet experienced on an Android phone. So I quickly moved from there to my present daily driver, which is an Xperia Z1. Now, the G4 Beat, I was actually quite impressed with, because what LG have done really well is that they've distilled all the great design features of the G4 flagship into the G4 Beat. Now, you don't necessarily get that premium leather cover out of the box, but what you do get is a really light, compact feeling, premium feeling, I would say, mid-tier phone that brings with it a lot of the feel and associated quality that you'd expect from the flagship G4. I have to actually compliment the camera in particular. You know, the G4 is really renowned for its camera, which is sort of claimed as the top Android contender at the moment, and the G4 Beat really brings a decent camera which really functioned well in the low light I used it in at the event itself. So I was quite impressed on that front, as it's a massive leap up from the rather dismal camera that was on the G3 Beat.
Well, as you know, the G4 is one of my favorite smartphones of the year thus far. I absolutely loved it, and a big part of that was the premium design, the feel of the device. Not only the leather back, even the one with the plastic ceramic back was also very, very nice. Now, how much of that flowed over into the G4 Beat in terms of the quality of the design and also the quality of the materials, and then lastly, about the form factor, because whenever manufacturers make these mid-tier devices that are supposedly based on their flagships, some other kind of things can go awry, like the buttons don't work properly, or maybe the bezels have to be blown up a bit. Just tell me a little bit about that.
Well, what I can tell you is that something I was really disappointed about with the G3 Beat is that it really carried over none of the premium aesthetic feel of the G3. And what I was really quite astonished that the G4 Beat does is it distills it quite nicely. The first thought I had when I lifted the G4 Beat up off its pedestal at the event was, wow, this is light. And generally, mid-tier phones are quite light because they're usually made of plastic and none of the more premium materials that flagships are made out of, namely metal and glass. But it definitely doesn't sacrifice that premium feeling despite being distinctly mid-tier. The back panel, which is ceramic plastic by default on the G4 Beat, definitely doesn't miss any of that premium build factor, and it's a huge step up from the rather austere plastic back that was on the G3 Beat a year prior. What I can tell you is that you might have to buy this separately, but LG have made a good contribution in allowing G4 Beat users to get that leather back as an accessory, and you can pick it in the same colors as the flagship G4. Now, you might lack that bit of leather stitching down the back, but it definitely still maintains the feel of being a premium device, even at that mid-tier level, which I think is a great step forward for LG. Well, in other news in the Android pond, we've discovered some more interesting rumors about BlackBerry's rumored Android phone. What can you tell us about that, Theunis? What do we know?
We actually got some news from the famed leaker that's known as EvLeaks on Twitter, that he came across some of the APKs that's going to be included in this BlackBerry Android device. And it seems that it's going to be carrying over a lot of the stock features that you find on BlackBerry 10 as well. So we've always seen BlackBerry experiment with Android. We know you can side load Android apps on BlackBerry 10 and things like that. So, I mean, I don't think this is a surprise, but it is interesting that it's going to be baked right into the Android build.
Now, to my mind, and after having seen that APK list, which is rather extensive, it looks like this is the kind of phone that would have to be quite premium, quite high-end to be able to run and maintain all of those services effectively. Where do you think we're going to see this Android BlackBerry eventually positioned?
I do think that it's going to be closer to the premium end of the market. I don't think it's going to be a budget device at all. I definitely do think that it's going to be closer to the premium end of the market. When it comes to the lower end, I think BlackBerry will stick to their Torch devices and their stock BlackBerry 10 devices, which are probably still going to go on selling. And I think they're going to target the Android device at a high segment of the market. And the reason is not only because of that extensive list of APKs that's going to be on the device. So it will need to have high-end hardware to run both Android and a very similar BlackBerry build to what's on BlackBerry OS. I do think, though, that they need to go for this higher end market because their cheaper phones are still selling in the emerging market. So that's not where they have trouble. It's just selling their newest, greatest phones to the market. We saw that the BlackBerry Z1 and then the Z3 weren't very successful devices at all.
Well, I think that says something very interesting about the internals, but I want to ask you externally, do you think that this Android BlackBerry phone is going to appear far more distinct than anything in BlackBerry's current lineup? Because BlackBerry have always been affirmed to maintain their design language and stick to a consistent build and very slowly improve that over a number of years.
We haven't seen that much in terms of leaks, but those that we have seen are mostly renders from people that have supposedly seen the device. And if those are to be believed, it will look quite a bit different from what we've seen previously. It looks like it's going to merge that QWERTY keyboard that BlackBerry is famous for and a full touchscreen display. So it seems like it's going to be an old school slider device. So you'll slide up the flat screen and it'll open up a QWERTY keyboard at the bottom. Whether this will appeal to a lot of people, I don't know. Maybe they're trying to capture both sides of the market, people that would like that keyboard and people that would want a touch keyboard. I think it's a very interesting strategy if it's true. I'm not sure if they have the right product to actually push that kind of design. It also seems like there might be some curved edges on the screens as well. So I think it will look quite a bit different to any other flagship device that we see today. In other news, we've just seen that ASUS has launched a new variant of their Zenfone 2, which launched a couple of months ago. And it's got a massive 256 gigabytes of internal storage. Now, why do you think they did this? Do you think there's a market for this kind of device?
Yes, I think there is. It's between you and myself who's going to download every app in the Play Store and test it. Well, I think actually... Personally, I think that's actually a great move. I would really like a phone that isn't limited in terms of, measly 64 gigabytes of storage at the best of times. When I was an iPhone user, the iPhone 4S was the last one I owned, I was continuously frustrated because I think I had the 8 gigabyte model, and even then I was growing frustrated with the lack of space I had to store my pictures, voice notes, or apps and that sort of thing. So I think it's a great move, but this being a special edition of the Zenfone 2, B2. It's not really going to see as wide an audience, I think, as the, let's say, traditional model. But where it's aimed at, I don't quite know where ASUS are going with this. In all honesty, I think this is ASUS simply trying to make a splash with their ZenPhone 2 lineup. This particular model is only going to be available in Brazil as far as we know. There's no word on availability in other markets. So I think this is ASUS really just saying, hey, we're still here, we're still making these flagships, and it's really more of an effort to entice consumer interest, because it's a continuous thing people seem to complain about, myself included, is the small storage space available in these flagship phones.
Review Spotlight, where we discuss our thoughts on the latest review devices to reach our hands.
So welcome back to part 2 of our review Smackdown, and now in this week, Theunis and I have spent a week now with the Withings Pulse Oxygen, the Jawbone UP Move, the Withings Activité Pop, as well as the Jawbone UP2. So to kick things off, I want to refer back to our past episode where I talked a little bit about the Huawei TalkBand B2. Now, for anyone picking up from here, the Huawei TalkBand B2 either works as a Bluetooth fitness tracker or a Bluetooth earpiece, and the central sort of module either clips out or clips in, depending whether you want to wear it in ear or on your wrist for either function. Now, I've been using for this past week the Withings Pulse Oxygen. Now, what I think this does really well, just to clarify in the beginning that it only works as a fitness tracker, not a Bluetooth earpiece. What it does really well is that it gives you a great many options to wear it where you like. So it comes with either a wristband or a waist clip, which you can which you can wear basically anywhere you want, on your collar, or on your waist. And I think that's a huge step forward for fitness trackers in general, in that people generally don't want to be constrained to a watch, if they're really wearing something on their wrist. And I think it's really great to be able to use it more as a traditional pedometer on your waist or on your collar. And it's a small device, it's really unobtrusive. Generally, I've enjoyed using it, but I found it just that little bit simplistic. As a dedicated fitness tracker, it really only serves to calculate your calories burnt, your steps taken, and your sleep. Now, on the front of the box, it does advertise that it can track your blood oxygen level and your blood pressure. But unfortunately, what they don't tell you is that that's only through manual input. So you're going to have to go to the app and manually enter that. It's not like an automatic function that takes place. Now, Theunis, you've been using the Withings Activité Pop and the Jawbone UP Move. Tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on either of those.
Well, just like the Pulse Oxygen, the Jawbone UP Move is also completely detachable from the wearable part itself. It's very different in the fact that it feels very, very cheap. It's very plasticky, it's very light, and the rubber doesn't feel great on the arm. But I mean, that's what it's built for. It's only built to be a dedicated fitness tracker and to come in at a very low price, and it comes in at below R1,000. So I mean, you get exactly what you pay for in that sense. In terms of the Withings Activité Pop, it actually, I'm really, really enjoying it. I didn't think I would enjoy it that much. And the biggest reason I find it so easy to use and so comfortable to use is because it does look and feel like a regular watch. It doesn't have a rectangular screen that's in the way. It's just a round watch with a normal dial on it, and then an extra dial for your fitness activity tracking. And of course, as I said last week, my favorite feature is the fact that it actually tracks your swimming behavior as well, and it picks that up automatically.
To wrap up the second part of our review Smackdown, let's quickly suss out what we did and didn't like about each device. The Huawei TalkBand B2 I found was a good device, but one that tried too hard to work in two different worlds that ultimately were too different. I felt that it functioned either as a Bluetooth earpiece or fitness tracker well. It functioned amicably in both ways. The audio content in your ear was crisp, and it functioned well as a fitness tracker. It was accurate. The battery life was good overall. But what really frustrated me was to transform, the device from one way to another. You have to detach that central unit, and I felt that this was quite poorly executed, because I felt in using it was all too easy to lose that central unit, and basically there goes your device one way or another without it. Generally, I was favorable to the product, but I think it has too many shortcomings at that price point for me to label it as, let's say, the best of this bunch. I think, if anything, it is the most different product in this entire group.
Another one that I feel is quite different to the others is the Jawbone UP Move. And that is only because of the price point. I mean, it's extremely cheap. It's very easy for someone that wants to come into the fitness market with this kind of device to just pick it up and use it. The battery life is great. It won't break, but it's not the best feeling device. What I do really like about it, though, is the app. The Jawbone app is great. It's very easy to use. It's intuitive. It's smart. And it's got a much better coach on it than I've seen on other wearables.
Well, moving on to the Withings Pulse Oxygen, I think whereas the TalkBand B2 maybe, in my view, tried to do a little bit too much, the Withings Pulse Oxygen tries to do a little bit too little. The device is quite simple. The biggest boon, obviously, to using it is that you can wear it where you like, which I think is a good step forward generally as a fitness wearable. But ultimately, I found the Withings app a little bit simplistic. Having come from using the Jawbone UP24 myself, I wasn't really enamored with it. I could say the same of the Huawei Wear app. I felt both were quite simplistic, and they're having to add that data entry of my blood pressure or my blood oxygen level, which it quite clearly says on the box is something this product does, was a little bit irritating to me. If I buy a product that's advertised in a certain way, I want it to perform that itself. I don't want to have to add that information to the app myself. So I think ultimately the Withings Pulse Oxygen, it's a decent wearable for someone who's maybe versatile, dynamic in their day and is moving around or want to wear it in different positions, but I think it just falls that much short of what I've experienced previously with other wearables.
And lastly, the Withings Activité Pop is probably my pick of the bunch. I really enjoy this wearable. I actually use it myself quite a lot. As you touched on previously, the Withings app isn't the best in the world. It is a little bit simplistic, but it does work well. And the only place I found it a little bit lacking is in terms of intuitive features like changing your goals or perhaps looking at your achievements. Other than that, I really think this device is great. It might be a little bit more expensive than other ones, but not that much. It retails for about 2,500 Rand. The reason I really like it is because it looks like a watch and it feels like a watch, and the fact that it picks up swimming so accurately and so easily is something that's completely unique. I haven't used another fitness wearable that does it as well. Some are starting to do it with GPS, but those aren't very accurate.
Speaking a little bit earlier about being versatile, something that the Withings Pulse Oxygen does, which I'll say it does quite well, is you can wear it any way you like. But I think the subtlety of the Activité Pop, as much as we like to ridicule its name, is something that really should be more spoken about because it's a classy product. It looks like a genuine watch. I think I would be quite comfortable wearing that in the boardroom or in any kind of environment. And the fact that those sensors, like you say, pick up any sort of activity or movement that you decide to take, I think is the better way forward. To my mind, if I want to use a wearable, I want it to be as invisible as possible. I don't want someone to stop me in the street and say, hey, what's that on your wrist? I want it to look like sort of, a normal watch that no one's going to bother me about during my day, and B, that, will suit anything I'm wearing or any activity that I'm doing. I think that the Activité Pop is actually a good step forward generally for fitness trackers, and it's a model I think that many manufacturers could possibly move towards in the future. That's all for this episode of Bandwidth Blog On Air.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you next week for episode 8 of Bandwidth Blog On Air.
You've been listening to Bandwidth Blog On Air, the weekly podcast of bandwidthblog.com.